Have you ever wondered if the big economic numbers you hear on the news truly reflect what's happening in your bank account? Or maybe your neighbors? It's a question that, well, it cuts right to the heart of our daily lives and often sparks some pretty intense debate. Today, we're going to embark on an important and often debated subject, how different presidencies might impact the economic well-being of various income groups right here in the United States. We're unpacking a really significant dilemma surrounding income inequality, and honestly, it's a story with some surprising twists when you start to dig into the data. Our mission for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. We're taking a specific set of sources featuring some detailed analysis from a prominent economist, and we want to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge. We're focusing specifically on economic performance and income trends under two recent U.S. administrations. And it's crucial to emphasize this. This is about understanding the data presented in these sources, making sense of the claims. It's not about taking sides. We are here simply to illuminate the arguments and the numbers as presented by our source, not to advocate for any particular viewpoint. And to help us navigate these, let's be honest, complex waters, I'm thrilled to have an expert guide with us who can help us synthesize this information and provide some crucial context.
It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, this is such a pertinent topic and one that's often, well, misunderstood. For this deep dive, our core source material comes from a series of pretty incisive analyses by Stephen Moore. He's a highly respected economist over at the Heritage Foundation. And these articles are quite recent, dated August 13th and 14th, 2025, which means they're providing a very timely, very immediate look at the most recent economic data and trends. That includes the period leading up to and during what Moore describes as a hypothetical second term for one of the administrations. Moore's perspective, as we'll get into, offers a distinct and often stark comparison of economic outcomes under the Trump and Biden administrations, particularly as they relate to income levels across different segments of the population. You know, his work often focuses on supply-side economics, tax policy, deregulation, those kinds of things as drivers of growth. So that gives you a specific lens through which he views these complex numbers.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're going to start by looking at the core contention, sort of the heart of Moore's analysis: income inequality under the microscope. This is really where Moore kicks off his argument, setting the stage with a claim that might challenge some conventional narratives you might have heard. When we look at the central irony presented in these sources, it's quite striking, isn't it? We start with President Biden's stated goal. He explicitly aimed to reduce income inequality. And this wasn't just, a passing remark. It was a clear objective. His administration talked about it repeatedly, often central to their economic policy announcements. The whole idea was building the economy from the bottom up and the middle out.
Exactly. That phrase implies a direct focus on lifting lower and middle income families, narrowing that gap between the wealthiest and everyone else.
But according to Stephen Moore's meticulous analysis, the reality, well, as he frames it, is quite different, and for him, directly contradictory to those intentions. Moore explicitly concludes that President Joe Biden, despite this stated goal, actually made income inequality worse, not better.
Yeah, that's a powerful assertion. And Moore doesn't make it lightly. He lays out what he sees as a compelling argument. He connects specific economic conditions and policies under the Biden administration to this outcome. For instance, Moore highlights how the surge in inflation during this period, particularly in necessities like food, energy, housing, how that disproportionately eroded the purchasing power of lower-income families.
Right, because those things make up a bigger chunk of their budget.
Precisely. So while wages might have seen some nominal increases, Moore argues that these gains were often outpaced by the rising cost of living for those least able to absorb it, effectively making them poorer in real terms. He also points to certain spending initiatives. He argues that while they might have been designed to stimulate the economy, their benefits, in his view, primarily accrue to asset owners or just didn't translate into significant, sustained real income gains for the middle and lower classes. And this, he contends, resulted in a widening of the income gap, contrary to the administration's stated objectives.
Okay, now, immediately contrasting this, Moore's conclusion regarding the prior administration, the Trump administration, paints a very different picture. He concluded that President Trump reduced income inequality. So, right off the bat, you have these two diametrically opposed claims from the same economist, applying his framework to two consecutive presidencies.
It really sets the stage for a compelling comparison, doesn't it? It asks us to consider the underlying factors that Moore believes contributed to such divergent outcomes.
Absolutely. And can you give us a quick initial overview of the data Moore uses to back these claims up? Just a preview.
Sure. So At a high level, it's quite simple in its presentation, but powerful. When Moore assesses the Biden administration, he reports that the lowest income group, and here we're typically talking about, say, the 25th percentile of income earners, the bottom quarter of households,
Right.
that group actually lost income in real inflation-adjusted terms.
Lost income, not just stayed flat, but went down.
Went down. According to Moore's numbers, a tangible decline in their purchasing power. Furthermore, the middle class, which Moore often defines as households earning around the median income, saw virtually no gain whatsoever.
Stuck in place.
Essentially, yes, their economic standing remained largely static, and the only group, according to Moore, that truly did better under Biden was the rich, typically represented by, the highest income quintile or maybe even the top 5%.
Okay, so that paints a picture of widening disparity, right? Top advances, bottom regresses, middle stagnates.
That's the picture Moore presents. Now, in stark contrast, when he examines the Trump administration, he asserts that every income group, from the lowest to the middle classes, and yes, even the wealthiest, saw real gains.
Every group.
Every group saw gains, according to his findings. And what's fascinating here is how these immediate implications challenge or, maybe reinforce widely discussed political narratives around economic fairness. You have one administration stating a goal to reduce inequality, with Moore's analysis suggesting the opposite happen.
Right.
And another administration, maybe not always framing its policies primarily around inequality, showing reported reductions in the very thing the first aimed to improve. It creates this fascinating puzzle which demands we dive deeper into these specific numbers and understand how such different outcomes are claimed by Moore and what specific policy levers he points to.
Absolutely. And that takes us directly into what Moore details as the economic narrative for the Trump administration, where he reports these significant gains across various income brackets. Let's start with the headline figure, because it's pretty significant. It really sets the tone for his analysis of this period. According to Stephen Moore's report, during Trump's first term, the average real income gains for families were a substantial $6,400.
That's a big number, especially when you adjust for inflation.
It is. And Moore didn't just stop there. He explicitly stated that families gained 10 times more income under Trump than they did under Joe Biden.
10 times more. That's the kind of comparison that really grabs attention.
It does. Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about that for a moment. 10 times more income. It's a dramatic difference in these average figures, suggesting a vastly different economic experience for the typical American family, at least according to this analysis. That average $6,400 gain really stands out, especially when you set it against what we'll discuss shortly about the Biden years.
And Moore dissects this figure further, doesn't he? He attributes it to specific policies.
Yes, he does. He argues that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 played a pivotal role, not just for corporations, but by stimulating business investment and job creation, which then, he argues, translated into higher wages across various sectors.
Okay.
Furthermore, he points to deregulation efforts and domestic energy independence as factors that reduce costs for businesses and consumers, effectively boosting real incomes.
So a combination of tax policy, regulation changes, and energy.
Right. And Moore's analysis often compares these domestic policy impacts to global economic conditions at the time, arguing the U.S. performance was distinct because of these specific policy choices made here.
Got it. Okay, so building on that overall average, Moore's analysis then drills down into how these gains were distributed, right? Which is key to his claim about reduced inequality.
Exactly. Let's get into the specifics.
Okay. For the lowest income group, specifically that 25th percentile, the bottom quarter of households, the reported gain was around $4,000.
$4,000 for the lowest income group.
Yeah. And think about the tangible significance of this for lower-income households. An extra $4,000 in real inflation-adjusted income, that can make a profound difference. It helps cover essentials, maybe allows for a little saving, paying down debt, improving quality of life.
Sure, a bit more breathing room.
Exactly. Moore emphasizes that this isn't just a statistic, it represents real impact for families on tighter budgets. He often points to a robust job market during that time, particularly low unemployment rates for minority groups and less skilled workers as a key driver here. He argues that when the economy is truly hot, opportunities expand for everyone.
Okay, so $4,000 for the lowest group. What about the middle?
Moving to the middle class, typically those around the 50th percentile or median income, they saw a reported gain of $6,400.
Ah, so that matches the overall average gain you mentioned earlier.
It does.
Wow.
And that's notable for Moore. It suggests the middle class was a significant and direct beneficiary. experiencing gains truly reflective of the overall economic improvement being reported. It wasn't just the very top seeing the benefits. The middle was firmly in that positive trend, indicating for him a broader, more inclusive prosperity.
Okay.
He'd often connect this to policies that encouraged business expansion and competition, leading to higher demand for labor and consequently higher wages.
And the wealthiest. What were their gains, according to Moore?
And finally, for the wealthiest bracket, the sources note a gain of almost $10,000.
Almost 10,000. Okay.
So while they gained the most in absolute dollar terms, it's the significant and widespread gains for the lower and middle income groups that lead more to his broader conclusion. His point is that income inequality actually narrowed during this period because the rate of growth for the lower income brackets was proportionally more impactful, or at least very significant.
Right. So this brings us back to Moore's central assertion. President Trump reduced income inequality. This conclusion is strongly reinforced by that consistent finding that every income group did better under his administration.
It's not just the rising tide lifts all boats idea in general. Moore's analysis implies the tide lifted the smaller boats, those at the lower and middle ends, at a proportionally faster or at least very significant rate, allowing them to narrow the gap with the larger vessels, relatively speaking.
Okay, I see.
He measures this reduction in inequality by observing that robust income growth at the bottom and middle percentiles compared to the top, suggesting a more balanced distribution of economic gains. This broad-based growth, he argues, directly contributed to a reduction in income inequality because the gains weren't disproportionately concentrated at the very top relative to the bottom. For Moore, this indicates a truly healthy economic environment where the benefits of growth are broadly shared.
That overall assessment from Moore really conveys a strong sense of positive economic performance during the Trump years then. The sources explicitly indicate the economy was better under Trump. And Moore's numbers, they say, provided cause for celebration for his economic success.
It paints a picture of widespread financial improvement for American families, a narrative built squarely on these detailed income figures.
And he often points to other indicators too, right? Like low unemployment rates, particularly for minority groups and women.
Yes, he does. He sees those as another strong indicator of this broad-based prosperity, arguing that when more people are working and earning, inequality naturally tends to decrease.
Okay. And just to bring in the most recent data mentioned in the sources, about a hypothetical second term.
Right. Just to touch on that briefly, looking hypothetically at a potential second term for Trump, it's mentioned that average median household incomes, adjusted for inflation, were up $1,174 in Trump's first 5 months back in office. Now, this isn't a prediction per se, but a snapshot based on economic models and existing trends that Moore would use to illustrate a potential continuation of that positive trajectory.
Even in a shorter, more recent time frame.
Exactly. It provides a current, albeit hypothetical snapshot, that for Moore reinforces his overall assessment of the potential for broad-based income growth under similar policy approaches.
And underscores his belief that specific policy choices like tax incentives, deregulation, have a direct, measurable impact on the real incomes of American families, where they are on the income ladder.
That's his core argument.
Okay. Now, let's turn the page and directly contrast this with the figures reported for the Biden administration, focusing on what Moore describes as reported losses and stagnation. If we just start with that headline figure again, overall income gains for families, the difference is, well, it's stark. While Trump saw an average real income gain of $6,400, Joe Biden only managed, as Moore puts it, an average real income gain of $551 for families during his term in office.
$551. Compared to $6,400.
I mean, let's put that into perspective for you, the listener. We were just talking about average gains of $6,400 in real income for families. Now we're looking at $551.
Yeah.
This is precisely why Moore explicitly said families gain 10 times more income under Trump.
The contrast between that $6,400 and $551 isn't just a numerical difference. It highlights, according to Moore's analysis, a profoundly different economic outcome for the typical American family.
And what does Moore attribute this sharp divergence to?
He points to a range of factors, including rapid inflation that outpaced wage growth, particular spending policies that, in his view, fueled inflation without generating proportionate real economic benefits, and also regulatory burdens that he believes stifled business growth and job creation, particularly at the lower and middle ends of the income spectrum.
So for Moore, these numbers speak volumes about the real-world impact of differing economic philosophies and policies.
That's his conclusion. And when we drill down into the detailed breakdown by income group under the Biden administration, the picture as reported by Moore, becomes even less favorable and starkly different from the previous period.
Okay, let's hear it.
For the lowest income group, again, those are on the 25th percentile, this group reportedly lost income in real inflation-adjusted terms.
Lost income, again, actually went backward.
Yes. Not just a lack of gain or stagnation, an actual decline in their purchasing power, meaning, as Moore puts it, they became poorer after Biden's presidency.
Wow. That's a profoundly significant detail, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially given the stated goals.
It is. It directly contradicts the idea of an economy benefiting those most in need. Moore rigorously argues that while nominal wages might have risen, the rampant inflation in essential goods and services, often fueled, he argues, by excessive government spending, effectively reduced the actual buying power for these households.
Which stands in stark contrast to the reported gains for this group under Trump.
Exactly. And for Moore, this represents a critical failure in policy to protect the most vulnerable.
Okay, what about the middle class under Biden, according to Moore?
For the middle class, typically the median income earners, the sources highlight no gain virtually whatsoever.
No gain virtually whatsoever.
Think about the implications of stagnation for this crucial segment. If the middle class isn't seeing their real incomes grow, their purchasing power isn't improving. Their ability to save for retirement or a down payment is hindered. Their overall financial stability remains static, or maybe even erodes over time due to those persistent inflationary pressures.
That feeling of running faster just to stay in the same place?
That's what Moore argues became a lived reality for many middle-class families. He links this stagnation to a combination of inflationary pressures, which effectively acted like a tax on their income, and an economic environment that, in his view, didn't generate the kind of robust, broad-based wage growth seen previously.
And then the wealthiest group.
And then, when looking at the wealthiest group, Moore notes that this was the only group that did better under Biden.
The only group.
According to his analysis, yes. This specific finding directly supports Moore's broader assertion about the exacerbation of income inequality, as the top advanced while the rest either fell back or stood still.
So we circle back to Moore's assertion again. Despite President Biden's stated goal to reduce income inequality, Moore concluded that he made income inequality worse, not better. This raises an important question for us to consider then. Why might a stated policy goal diverge so significantly from reported outcomes, especially when viewed through the analytical lens of an economist like Stephen Moore? What does he say about this apparent disconnect?
That's a crucial question, and Moore addresses it head-on. He attributes this divergence primarily to the administration's economic policies themselves, particularly their approach to fiscal spending and regulation.
Yeah.
While the stated intention might have been to stimulate demand and support vulnerable populations, Moore argues that the sheer volume of new spending, especially during and after the pandemic, injected too much money into the economy relative to the available supply of goods and services. This, in his view, was the primary driver of the inflation we observed.
Too much money chasing too few goods.
That's the classic inflationary argument he makes. He also highlights regulatory policies that he contends increased costs for businesses, which in turn were passed on to consumers. For Moore, this combination created an environment where the cost of living outpaced wage growth for the majority, disproportionately harming those with fixed or lower incomes, while those with assets or higher incomes were better positioned to weather or even benefit from the inflationary environment.
So he connects the policy choices directly to the unintended outcome of increased inequality, despite the stated goals.
That's the connection he draws, yes.
Now, there's another specific detail from the sources that Moore highlighted, and it's quite controversial. It impacts how we understand overall economic health. He pointed to what he called a gigantic error in job creation data.
Yes, the BLS numbers.
Specifically, Moore argues that the Bureau of Labor Statistics reportedly overshot jobs created by an astounding 1.5 million in the final 2 years of Biden's term. Moore called this a gigantic error.
1.5 million jobs, that's not insignificant.
Not at all. Think about that discrepancy for a moment, listener. A difference of 1.5 million jobs isn't just a rounding error. It's a substantial figure. What could a difference of this magnitude mean for our understanding of the true health of the economy, particularly the job market?
Well, if official numbers are off by that much, it potentially changes the narrative around employment growth and economic vitality quite significantly.
It challenges how we interpret the strength of the job market and, by extension, the overall economy.
Indeed. And this is a significant contention for Moore, and he provides a detailed basis for his claim. He often points to discrepancies between the initial, highly publicized monthly job reports.
The ones that get all the headlines.
Exactly. And the later, less discussed revisions. These revisions, based on more complete data, sometimes show a substantial downward adjustment to those initial estimates. Moore also frequently cross-references these BLS figures with other economic indicators, things like small business employment surveys, payroll processing data, even anecdotal evidence from employers.
Trying to triangulate the real picture.
Right. He argues that when these other data sets are considered, the official BLS numbers appear inflated, particularly in specific sectors. He posits that this overestimation of job creation has profound implications. For one, it could lead to an overly optimistic assessment of economic growth and labor market strength.
Misleading, potentially.
Potentially misleading, yes. Furthermore, it might obscure underlying weaknesses in certain sectors or the true rate of participation in the workforce. For Moore, if the foundational job numbers are inaccurate by this much, it undermines the credibility of other economic indicators and can lead to misguided policy decisions. He suggests it contributes to a narrative of economic health that, for many, just doesn't align with their personal experience.
And that takes us right to the overall assessment of Biden's economic performance in these sources, which is described as absolutely devastating by Moore.
It's very strong language.
It is a very strong characterization of the numbers Moore is presenting, reflecting his deep conviction about the negative impacts of the policies as he sees them. The sources further claim that the assertions of a healthy and working Biden economy, the narrative often heard from some media outlets and political commentators, were not reflective of Americans' personal experiences checking their bank accounts.
That phrase really resonates, doesn't it? Checking their bank accounts.
It does. It reinforces a sentiment that nobody was fooled by official narratives, suggesting a profound disconnect between the reported statistics and the on-the-ground financial reality for many people struggling with everyday costs.
And Moore elaborates on this devastating assessment by drawing parallels between those statistical reports and the lived realities of households. He argues that while GDP might show growth or unemployment rates appear low, the critical metric for average Americans is their personal purchasing power.
What things actually cost versus what you earn.
Precisely. When you're paying significantly more for groceries, gasoline, rent, a seemingly positive aggregate statistic can feel meaningless, maybe even insulting. He emphasizes how his income data showing real losses for lower incomes and stagnation for the middle directly aligns with that personal experience of financial squeeze.
So for Moore, the true health of the economy isn't just about headline numbers.
Not at all. It's about whether people feel they are getting ahead, whether their savings are growing, whether their daily lives are becoming more affordable. He uses this anecdotal, yet widely felt experience to underscore his critique of the broader economic picture during this period.
So what does this all mean when we bring it together? How do we connect these dots and explore the broader implications of Stephen Moore's detailed analysis?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Moore's analysis, as presented in these sources we've discussed, paints a really stark tale of two economies. Under the Trump administration, his analysis consistently points to significant real income gains across the board for all income groups, leading to a reported reduction in income inequality.
The $4,000 gain for the lowest, $6,400 for the middle, almost $10,000 for the wealthiest.
Exactly. This broad-based prosperity, he argues, was a direct result of policies focused on tax cuts, deregulation, and energy independence, which stimulated supply and job creation. Then, in stark contrast, under the Biden administration, Moore reports income losses for the lowest income group. They became poorer in real terms.
And the middle class saw virtually no gain.
No gain whatsoever in their purchasing power. And the only group that did better, according to Moore, was the wealthy, which, by definition, led to a clear increase in income inequality.
The $551 average gain overall compared to $6,400.
Right. This diametrically opposed set of outcomes, all rigorously attributed by Moore to his analysis, offers a consistent policy-centric narrative. It's important to stress, again, this is all based on Stephen Moore's analysis from the Heritage Foundation.
Got it.
The why it matters here is profound, I think, especially for policy discussions. If these findings, as Moore presents them, are accurate, they highlight crucial significances for how we approach economic growth, wealth distribution, and, well, the overall effectiveness of different economic policies.
Because Moore explicitly links these outcomes to policies.
Yes, he explicitly links these outcomes to your policies, in Trump's case, suggesting a direct causal relationship between presidential actions and the financial well-being of different income groups. This isn't just about abstract numbers. It's about real people's lives, their ability to get ahead or maybe fall behind.
Right.
It prompts us to consider what policies might genuinely lift all boats. And for more, this often points towards those supply-side approaches that foster production and investment. Or conversely, what policies might exacerbate existing disparities, regardless of stated intentions, if they lead to issues like unchecked inflation or burdensome regulation, in his view. His analysis presents a clear argument for a specific policy direction based on the outcomes he observed.
And this brings us back to something we touched on earlier, the role of data versus perception. This analysis really encourages critical thinking about how economic data is presented and, crucially, how it aligns, or doesn't, with individual experiences.
That checking their bank accounts line again.
Exactly. The sources highlight this by mentioning the claim that a healthy and working Biden economy wasn't reflective of Americans' personal experiences. It suggests a tension between official aggregate statistics and the lived reality for many.
Hmm.
It raises the question of whether people felt the impact of certain policies directly in their pockets, independent of what broader economic reports might have indicated.
Hmm.
It pushes us, and you, the listener, to consider what metrics truly resonate with the average person's financial situation, beyond just GDP or unemployment rates.
It underscores the importance of digging into the granular data, like real income by percentile, to truly understand the economic landscape from different viewpoints.
Absolutely.
And it's important, just briefly, to remind our listener again about the source of the specific analysis. We've been discussing the findings of Stephen Moore, an economist from the Heritage Foundation. This is a specific economic perspective, one that often emphasizes the role of tax policy, regulation, sound money, in fostering robust economic growth that benefits all income levels.
It's one viewpoint.
It's one significant viewpoint, yes. It's essential to understand that different economists or organizations might analyze economic data using different methodologies. They might prioritize different metrics, maybe focusing more on wealth inequality or social mobility rather than strictly income, or they might interpret the same numbers through a different analytical lens.
Sure.
Moore's analysis provides a clear and consistent narrative based on his chosen metrics and interpretation. It offers one specific, well-articulated argument to consider in the broader economic discourse. This deep dive is really focused on understanding his perspective and the detailed data he presents.
Exactly. And that's why we always encourage further inquiry. This deep dive has given us a very specific, detailed look at Stephen Moore's analysis and his interpretation of income trends under two recent administrations. It reinforces the value of looking beyond just the headlines, doesn't it? Truly digging into the specific figures and the economist's interpretation, just as we've tried to do here. It's about empowering you, the listener, to be a more informed consumer of economic news, able to discern the details that truly matter and to understand the specific arguments economists are making about policy impacts. So let's quickly recap the central findings from Stephen Moore's analysis that we've unpacked today. We saw his reported substantial real income gains across all income groups and a claimed reduction in income inequality under the Trump administration. Families gaining an average of $6,400, driven by specific policy approaches. More highlights.
Right. Gains across the board.
Then, in stark contrast, under Biden, Moore's analysis reported real income losses for the lowest income group, virtual stagnation for the middle class, and an increase in income inequality, with the wealthiest being the only group to report gains and only a 551 average income gain for families overall.
A very different picture. These are the sharp differences highlighted in the sources we explored, presenting Moore's compelling narrative of divergent economic outcomes tied to specific administrations and their policies. And as we conclude, maybe consider this thought-provoking question, one that Moore's analysis really brings to the forefront. If the economic experiences of different income groups can diverge so sharply between administrations, as Moore's analysis suggests, well, what metrics do you think best capture the true health of an economy for the average person? Beyond just headline numbers like GDP or overall employment. And how might understanding these detailed breakdowns of income distribution and the specific policy arguments influencing them, like Moore's, influence how we evaluate future economic policies and the promises made by those seeking to lead?
That is an excellent question to ponder. We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about and armed you with a more nuanced understanding of these crucial economic debates, specifically through the lens of Stephen Moore's work. We encourage you to continue your own deep dives into economic data, armed with the specific details and critical thinking skills you've honed of us today. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and keep learning.